Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Chris Stallings. You know me here on YouTube as MarauderX, and this is a slightly different Operation Recap video. We've been having some technical difficulties with the site, so typically what I do for the recap videos is, Fridays I typically walk through all of the articles we've done for the past week, see what I want to report on, and then report on and link back to the site. Well, with the technical difficulties, I can't, do that. I can't look at the site. I can only look at, what we've posted, but I don't know what actually made for a good story based off of, views and comments. And then linking it back to the site would probably link it back to possibly a broken section of the site while we're in the process of repairing it. So this recap, I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to recap a top 10 list. Yay! So this top 10 list is going to be my top 10 fighting games. Now, this is actually a really surprising list to me, specifically because fighting games are not a genre that I find myself seeking out. I play them, I enjoy them, but I honestly didn't think I had 10 to do. How weird is that? But I have 10, and I actually had several more that had to be cut from the list. So I'm actually really surprised by that. So with any top 10 list, it's going to go from number 10 being the lowest value, and number 1 being my favorite of the group. And I'm going to go into a little bit of discussion as to why this game is on the list and, why it's there. So, without further ado, we're going to start with number 10. Fighters Megamix on the Sega Saturn. Now, this game combines Fighting Vipers and Virtua Fighter, as far as the franchises go, into one big 3D fighting game. Both franchises kind of pioneered 3D fighting on the Saturn. Virtua Fighter pioneered 3D fighting in general. The differences being the Fighting Vipers had a armor aspect where you could destroy your opponent's armor, doing a little bit more damage. That mechanic did carry into Fighters Megamix, which kind of imbalanced the game a little because you have half the roster that don't have armor, half the roster that do. So it seemed a little weird that both mechanics, and you can't add armor to the Virtua Fighter characters because they never had it to begin with. So, a little imbalanced, a little awkward, but the game itself just had a wonderful cast. In addition to these two, there were a ton of secret characters that AM2 decided that they were just going to throw into the mix. Characters like Rent-A-Hero, that was in a game that never released in the US. You had Janet from Virtua Cop. And then you also had Bean the Duck from Sonic the Fighters, and a stick of meat named Meat, and the Daytona USA car. That in itself is the whole reason why this is on the list, because the special characters at the end are just hilarious. They are so much fun to play. The game does not take itself seriously at all at that point. So, that's how it gets to be my number 10. You can play as a stick of meat. Number 9, Darkstalkers, the Night Warriors. Oh, I love Darkstalkers. It is basically just a reskin of Street Fighter. Hands down, it is a reskin. The character moves are the same. Characters broken up into the same tactical abilities. So much so that Morgan, being a direct clone of Ryu, has a fireball, has a shoryuken. It's a Street Fighter reskin. I just like the reskin a little bit better. The characters in Street Fighter never really stood out to me. You've got Ryu and Ken, two martial artists. Like, everything seemed a little too, if you want to make it real, then people shooting fireballs, not real. If you want to take it to another, odd extreme, do something special. And characters of myth and legend, monsters, that kind of did it. That was awesome for me. You have, vampires, werewolves, Frankenstein monster type deals. That made a little more sense of people shooting fireballs and, flaming fists and than, anyone else in that game, really. So, that's why Darkstalkers is my number 9. Number 8, The Last Blade 2. This is a Neo Geo based game, but my first experience on it was the Dreamcast, because way back when I first played it, pirating Dreamcast games were all the rage. So I played a lot of games that I'm not entirely sure got a US release. I don't know if this game got a US release on the Dreamcast officially or not. Just the last time I've played it was a bootleg. I think the copy I own is a bootleg. I don't think it's a legitimate copy. But again, I got it from a friend. But the game is amazing. It is weapons-based fighter, 2D, kind of an evolution of what you would see in a game like Samurai Showdown. Everyone has a weapon, everyone has a gimmick with that weapon. Imagine if you would a 2D Soul Calibur. That is really the best way that I can describe it. It takes all of the fun of a 2D game, but then has the weapon fighting aspect to it. A lot of unique characters, a lot of tie-ins to other things. Like they do take some history with it, with like the Shinsengumi. So I was really impressed by this game when I played it, and I'm kind of now I want to look and see if it got an official US release and if I can track down a legitimate copy, or if mine's not. Number 7. I'm already at number 7. Wow, really? King of Fighters 94. Basically, any of the King of Fighters games can the Fatal Fury King of Fighters franchise. It was different. King of Fighters 4, you had, teams, and it just kind of felt different to me. And the characters that you're playing as are the Fatal Fury characters that I just always thought didn't get nearly enough love. I mean, some of them do. Mai Shiranui is, a very popular character in fighting games and anime. But, Terry Bogard, Andy Bogart, Joe Higashi, Geese Howard, these are characters that some people don't know of. And they're interesting characters. A lot of the character development that I learned, not coming from the games, but like the anime and manga spin-offs. But the game itself, SNK's response to games like Street Fighter. Again, it's mostly a clone rehash, but it was a good clone rehash, and to me it felt a little bit faster at times. But that could just be my nostalgia goggles looking at it, that it felt faster because it was different. I'd have to go back and replay it just to see how it holds up against some of the other titles on this list. Number 6, Tatsunoko vs. Capcom. And I'm completely unbiased about this, or I'm completely biased about this game. The only reason why this game is on the list is because it has two of my favorite characters of all time. One from the Tatsunoko side, being Tekkaman Blade, and one being from the Capcom side, which is Zero. Downside of this game is a lot of people don't know the Tatsunoko characters. I know a couple of them. I don't know all of them. I've watched, Battle for the Planets, Gatchaman, several of the characters come from. I've watched Tekkaman Blade. I've watched Karas. It's, there's a lot of characters that I do know, but for the characters I know, the characters I don't know, I just look at it, it's like, who are you? Why? What? That's really the game's biggest downfall, is that you don't know a lot of the characters. The characters I do know, I love, and I was really excited to see them in fighting games being brought into, the 21st century in some ways. So, I can't tell you the last time I've seen anything with Tekkaman Blade in it besides the DVD re-releases. The game itself is a typical Capcom versus game. Plays with the same rules. You pick a team, you've got super moves, super meters, tag attacks. Not really deviating from the norm, but it was a really pretty game on the Wii. It did showcase a lot of what the Wii could do, even if it was not nearly as powerful as its competing systems at the time. Number 5, another game that, this one I know did not get a US release on this console. It did get a US release on the PS2, but the first time I played it was the Dreamcast again, because piracy. Guilty Gear X. Speaking of unique characters, you've got a little girl pirate wielding a giant anchor. You've got a pool hustler who has an Egyptian eye painted on his hair that covers his face, like Cousin It. And you have a doctor who has a paper bag on his head, and who non sequitur-like breaks the rules of physics, like Deadpool. The game itself just leads into a lot of what? But it was an insanely fun fighting game. Characters all played drastically differently based off of their size, their speed, their techniques. button mashing was not something that you could easily do because each character had a one-hit kill ability, where if you were fighting against someone who knew how to do that, you were screwed unless you knew how to, counter, dodge, or just defend against it in some way. I've spent so many hours playing this game, but the thing that really sold it for me the most was the soundtrack. The soundtrack to that is an amazing game soundtrack. I really cannot stress that enough. It was great. I've actually ripped the soundtrack from the Dreamcast version because it just was amazing. Better than any other Guilty Gear game that I've played since then, which there were numerous. But the Guilty Gear X Dreamcast soundtrack was just top-notch for me. It is the epitome of fighting game music. Number 4. This game is going to be a little bit of a surprise because when you think of fighting games, there's typically 3 schools of fighting games. You have a 2D fighter, a 3D fighter, and a party brawler. And this one is a party brawler. It started off as a 3D fighter, kind of. Power Stone 2 is really just Power Stone 2 is the definition of party brawler. It takes the 3D fighting aspect of Power Stone 1 and adds in 4-player madness. Power Stone 1 was one-on-one with a 3D arena, 3/4 overhead view. Power Stone 2 takes that and expands on it. Arenas move, stages move, change of locations. It takes a quasi-3D fighting game and puts it on par as a quasi-3D response to Smash Brothers. Doesn't take itself too seriously. The game is fairly balanced for what it is. Weapons are completely overpowering to other characters. The special attacks, when you finally collect all 3 Power Stones, do make you a beast. But with 4 players, it's entirely possible to gang up on a threat, avoid a threat, and then retaliate. And the fact that the game itself is just so silly. It's just fun. I love playing that game, especially when you get 3 friends on a Dreamcast. That's it. Now, for number 3, we have a very particular entry. Number 3, we have Soul Calibur 3. I find myself interested in Soul Calibur 1 and 3, and I disliked 2 and 4. And to be fair, I haven't played Soul Calibur 5. 1 looked better on the Dreamcast than in my local arcade, which blew my mind. 2 had gimmicky characters based off of what console you purchased it on, and the characters just seemed out of place to me. I know Link was kind of cool, Heihachi was just broken, Spawn was very WTF. And then Soul Calibur 4, you had Star Wars characters, which just are completely out of place. There was no reason for them to be there at all. No. But Soul Calibur 3, you had new characters enter the roster, completely odd characters. Zasalamel, just with a giant scythe, one of my favorite characters. But then you also had an expanse of single-player aspect. You had a new adventure-type mode, you had character creation, but 3 just seemed to be the best for me. It had a lot of characters, it worked a little bit more on character balance. Soul Calibur 1, Cervantes was unbalanced to me. He was just hands down a god. A little more balanced than Soul Calibur 3. But 3, I cannot tell you the amount of hours I've spent on that game. Even compared to Soul Calibur 1, which was a day 1 purchase for me with the Dreamcast. Soul Calibur 3, I've spent more time on. I still have my copy, and I still find myself going back to playing it with friends at certain times of the year, because of just how good it seems to be. Number 2, Marvel vs. Capcom 2. Another 2 in the 2 spot, following a 3 in the 3 spot. That was kind of interesting. I didn't really plan on that. Marvel vs. Capcom 2 to me is the exact opposite of Soul Calibur 3, really. MVC2 had so many characters that it was impossible to balance them all. So much so that you have characters that are just completely imbalanced that you have unlimited hit combos with if you find someone who's good enough with that character. And it's hard to defend against. Simply because when you throw in, I think, 60 some odd characters, it's kind of hard to balance. The reason why I chose 2 over 3, you have the expansive character roster, but I like the 2D aspect. The 2D fighter seems a little bit faster to me than the quasi 3D fighter. Marvel vs. Capcom 2 seems faster, it seems more Twitch oriented, you have to be able to reflexively react, whereas 3 seems to be slowed down a little bit to me. I know it's not. I know it's not, and I don't want anyone flaming and say, oh my god, it's not. No, that's just, I guess, not accurate observation, just it feels faster because I have more experience with it. I'm fairly sure if I had more experience in 3, it would feel about the same. But I just like the characters in 2 better. Some of the characters in 3, like Arthur, I was really surprised to see Arthur from Ghouls and Ghosts make it. That was surprising. But other characters in 3, like Dormammu, I just don't care about. Whereas there are characters in Marvel vs. Capcom 2 I don't care about, but for every character that I don't care about, there's at least 2 that I do care about, because they're fun. Servbot all the way. And my number 1 fighting game. Before I do that, we will recap the top 10 just really quick. We've got number 10, Fighters Megamix. Number 2, Darkstalkers The Night Warriors. Number 8, The Last Blade 2. Number 7, King of Fighters 94. Number 6, Tatsunoko vs. Capcom. Number 5, Guilty Gear X. Number 4, Power Stone 2. Number 3, Soul Calibur 3. Number 2, Marvel vs. Capcom 2. Number 1. Again, going back to the 3 schools of fighting games. You've got 2D, 3D, and Party Brawler. Number 1 is a Party Brawler. It's Super Smash Bros. Brawl. Now I know, I'm going to catch a lot of flack for this, but Brawl just seemed a little bit better to me. It seemed a little more, graphically, yes, it's a little more polished than Melee because it's on a newer generation system compared to a GameCube. It's got more characters. Yes, it has more characters because you can do more with a later gen console. Even with the fact that both games have clones, Melee had more clones. And the clones seemed kind of half put together to me. Mario versus Dr. Mario. That's ridiculous to me. It just seems silly that you're going to do that as a thing rather than just reskin. Now, Brawl has its own clones. Pretty much all of the space animals are the same character. There's no denying that. I was disappointed that there were that many space animals. Wolf did not need to be in the game. But Brawl did something good. And ignore the tripping aspect, but it made it so that you didn't have to master a particular skill that may or may not have been available to all characters. Melee was more of a competitive fighter because you were able to find exploits within the game. Wave dashing, to be specific, aggravated me to no end. Because if it was a skill you couldn't master, then you had no hope of actually being able to play on even a close to competitive level. Brawl took that out. It's like you don't need that style skill. They've removed that type of mentality. And that would have been great, but then they went and added tripping, which was just stupid. Just stupid. I do have high hopes that this number 1 will actually be replaced with Smash Brothers for the Wii U. I am already disappointed in that because they have already shown that there is one clone character that they have announced. I believe it's Lucina. I'm going to butcher this person's name. The female character from Fire Emblem Awakening is a clone of Marth. They have come out and said this. All of her moves, actions, even character model animations are the same as Marth's. But they have said that she is balanced differently. And without being able to play the game and knowing what that means, it just sounds like we're trying to say that this character is a clone without saying that she's a clone. which disappoints me because at this point they had not had a clone character, except for maybe Ganondorf and Captain Falcon, which I was still hoping that they would change. They changed Mario between Melee and Brawl to be less like Luigi, even though they've done a lot of changes to Luigi, adding Flood instead of the Mario Tornado. But I was hoping that Ganondorf and Captain Falcon would finally split into two unique characters, and then they go and throw a clone in on me. So as it is, the reason why Brawl on top, even with its downsides, great character roster, and like a clone, or less degree of clones, I should say. But again, I'm already admitting flat that this game will probably be replaced with its newest reiteration for the Wii U. So, with that said, I want to know your top fighting games. Like I said, this is not a genre that I find myself seeking out, so there are a ton of games on this genre that I don't know about, that I've not played, and that maybe they would knock some of these off the list if I got a chance to do that. So let me know what your top fighting games are. Educate me in the ways of fighting games, so that perhaps, I might have a little bit better understanding of this really unique genre. So, till then, later everyone.